So before I was in creative front-end development, I started my career actually in video production. I started with wedding videos and then went into motion graphics for corporate design. And at the same time, I was sort of on the side trying to build my own thing. I was always a tinkerer, always building little small applications, hoping that I'd build something that would make $1 million and I'd be set for life, which never happened. But one thing I found myself doing more than the rest is working in ActionScript. So having Flash open with some sort of canvas in front of me and some elements on there and writing code that would move stuff around. And I really enjoyed that. To be fair, I enjoy all sorts of code, but that's something that really caught my attention. From there, I ended up taking on a lot more freelance work. A lot of it was full stack, everything from small fixes to large scale WordPress sites and crazy networking and all that, DevOps and all that fun stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that was just too broad for me. I really like just to focus on the creative, what can I make in the browser? What cool things can I create? Which is how I ended up sort of narrowing down not just to front-end development, but to specifically just creative applications of front-end development. Um, and right about then is when I discovered just how much a pain in the backside Safari can be, and it's been downhill ever since. So, how would I recommend setting up a structure for a project scalability? Well, I've done a lot of projects recently for some big clients, and when I do, I find myself in the early prototyping phase getting so excited that I just want to build the most complicated thing possible. Like I can't wait to get my head in the game and sink my teeth into a challenge. What I've found is that actually a better path to ensuring that a project can scale and survive technical debt over time is to keep things simple. The simplest approach to something is usually the best. Unfortunately, my headspace is usually in the area of edge cases a lot of the time. I'm always thinking, oh, what if a user does this? Or what if a user does that? Or what if this breaks? Which is a good ideas to keep in your head, but you shouldn't be guiding your architecture solely based on the edge cases. So I would say plan for the 80%, make something that's simple and that works, and that when you have a need to handle edge cases, then you can take those on one at a time. And if you do that, I think you'll build something where you're not developing as much technical debt, and you can have a project that can scale as time goes on. So my passion as a, call me whatever you will, developer, programmer, whatever that term is, probably stems from the intersection of technologies and just figuring out what you can do. It's a little bit of a hacking mindset where you have to say, okay, here's the login form. How do I get around it? In this sense, it's more of a what can I do if I can combine two or three platforms, open source technologies, and code, and what can I build? Um, a lot of the times, for example, I'll learn of a brand new tool or something that just popped up, and I'll be like, "Oh man, that's really cool. How can I use it with insert of a tool here?" So, like, how can I use a Terso SQL database with a Cloudflare doable object? How could I combine that with WordPress for some reason? Or how can I, well, you get the idea. Looking at the intersections of different technologies and just seeing what the possibilities are, that's a little bit of a passion for me outside of just making pretty things, having fun. Um, Obviously, the more impact a project has, the more exciting it is to sort of get into it and sink your teeth into it. But at the end of the day, if it's fun web technology, I'm going to have a good time playing with it. So some of the exciting trends that I see in the front end community, unfortunately, there's so many of them, and they're popping up at such a rate that by the time I record this video, like between me recording this and you watching it, there's probably 10 new frameworks that we all have to go learn, or else we're going to be out of a job. Um, but no, there's a lot of stuff coming up. A couple of things that excite me the most, although I will admit I don't have much experience in it, is WebGPU. I'm very excited to see just that step up in progression, access to hardware between WebGL and WebGPU, and seeing what you can actually do with that. Look at me talking like I have any idea what it is. I don't. We'll find out. But on the other hand of that, I one thing that's caught my attention more recently is StackBlitz. Not necessarily the company as a whole, although from what I can tell, they're a great company, but the underlying technology of web containers in the browser. I saw one of their examples was running WordPress in what I believe was just in my browser. And last I checked, WordPress uses a MySQL database. I've also seen examples of Postgres now being run in the browser. So I'm like, are we going to suddenly have backend become a client side thing? I guess we'll find out. But yeah, there's a lot of new emerging technologies all the time. part of the excitement and the joy of being a front end developer is just Google searching and finding out what's going to be the next thing coming up. Oh, okay. So choosing between vanilla CSS and using a CSS framework is a tough question for me because I've been around since the days of, having to write without any possible sort of compiler or anything else, just writing plain CSS. So that's where I grew up. That's how I learned how to write CSS. And to me, you know, except for some of the more modern new features, the base of CSS comes very naturally to me. Don't want to brag, but I can probably center a div in about 45 minutes or less. Um, so anyway, I sort of have this tendency to lean towards writing like BEM style CSS. Sass has been something that I've been very much into, but these days you don't really need it. CSS has a lot of sort of the core features built in. One of the big ones just being nested CSS, which is very, very convenient to use. That being said, I'm absolutely not against using a CSS framework like a Tailwind, or even if you want to go back to like a Bootstrap. Those have their utility, and there's definitely projects where I would, depending on the need, I'd pick up a Tailwind if that was the thing. But I think my personal choice will be just writing good old fashioned BEM CSS. I think the future of front end development, of web development in general, is very bright for everybody. I know a lot of people after ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot and all these different AI tools coming out are saying, well, 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to be in a situation where AI can write all the code. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's true. But let's look at 20 years ago when it was just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I hated the fact that all of a sudden we had to transpile something. We had to write terminal code. Like I had to write in a command line to get my project to build. What is that? Can we just not write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript anymore? I saw the future of technology as daunting and too much. And then I learned it and it figured out I was just fine with it. And I think the future of AI and code and where we go will be the same thing. It's completely unpredictable. It's going to leave a sour taste in our mouth when it arrives and make us think, oh man, this is the end for us. But we're creative and we'll overcome. So I think in, let's call it 10, 20, 30 years, the landscape of web development will look very different, but we will still be running the show.